The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez had walked its polished floors so many times that she knew every crack in the ancient stone beneath her feet. She remembered the first time she had entered this place as a young diplomat, barely 30 years old and trembling with excitement at the thought of representing humanity among the stars. That had been 20 years ago, and the excitement had long since faded into something else entirely. The council chamber itself was a marvel of alien engineering, with walls that seemed to shift and change color depending on who was speaking, and a ceiling so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top during long sessions. 12 species held permanent seats on the council, each one thousands of years older than humanity, each one carrying the weight of ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen while humans were still learning to make fire. The Valkyrie sat in the highest position, their insect-like bodies clicking and buzzing as they communicated in their strange dual language of sound and chemical signals. They were the founders of the council, the oldest of the elder races, and they never let anyone forget it. Below them sat the Thasians, aquatic beings who floated in specially designed tanks, filled with the purple waters of their homeworld. They were philosophers and poets, speaking in riddles that could take years to fully understand. And they looked down on every other species with the quiet contempt of those who believed they had already discovered every truth worth knowing. The Dominari occupied the military wing of the chamber, their massive reptilian bodies covered in ceremonial armor that had been passed down through 100 generations. They respected only strength, only power, only the ability to destroy one's enemies completely and without mercy. And then there were the humans, sitting in the smallest section of the chamber, in seats that had been added only 300 years ago when humanity had finally proven itself worthy of junior membership. Elena straightened her diplomatic robes and prepared herself for another day of being talked down to by species who considered her people to be little more than clever animals. The morning session began as it always did, with High Arbiter Zethval of the Valkyrie clicking his way through a list of minor disputes and trade agreements. A mining colony in the Outer Rim had complained about unfair taxation. A shipping lane needed to be rerouted around a newly discovered pulsar, the usual business of running a galaxy that contained trillions of souls. Elena voted when she was supposed to vote, and stayed silent when she was supposed to stay silent, playing the role that humanity had been assigned since joining the council. Be patient, she told herself. Be diplomatic. Be the bigger species, even when they treat you like children. It was what humanity had always done when her ancestors had first made contact with the Valkyrie 500 years ago. They had been given a simple choice: join the council and accept its rules, or be destroyed. Humanity had chosen to join, and they had spent every moment since then trying to prove that they belonged. They had accepted limits on their expansion, agreeing to colonize only the worlds that the council approved. They had shared their technology freely, giving away innovations that had taken generations to develop. They had paid tribute in resources, sending shiploads of rare minerals and agricultural products to elder races who could have easily produced these things themselves, but preferred to take them from the young ones instead. And through it all, humanity had grown, despite the restrictions, despite the limitations, despite being treated as second-class citizens in a galaxy they had every right to call their own. Humans had thrived. Their population had tripled in the last century alone. Their colony worlds, though few in number, had become models of efficiency and prosperity. Their ships, though limited by treaty to a mere fraction of what the elder races possessed, incorporated innovations that even the Valkyrie could not replicate. Elena knew that the council had noticed. She had seen the way High Arbiter Zethval watched the human delegation during sessions, his compound eyes tracking their every movement with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She had heard the whispers in the corridors, the quiet conversations that stopped whenever a human approached. She had read the intelligence reports that spoke of secret meetings, of elder races gathering without humanity's knowledge to discuss the problem of the young ones. But she had told herself that it was nothing to worry about. Surely the Council would not move against humanity. Not after 300 years of loyal service. Not after everything they had done to prove their worth. She had been wrong. The afternoon session began with an announcement that froze the blood in Elena's veins. High Arbiter Zethval rose from his position at the top of the chamber, his carapace gleaming in the shifting light, and his mandibles clicked together in the pattern that indicated a formal proclamation. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human question, he said. And Elena felt her heart stop beating in her chest. The human question, she had not even known there was a question. After careful consideration of the evidence, Zethval continued. The Council has determined that humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Though Elena noticed that none of the elder races seemed surprised by this announcement, they had known. She realized with growing horror. They had all known. And no one had warned her. Humanity's rapid growth is unsustainable, Zethval said, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a species that had been making decisions for other civilizations. For 10,000 years, their technological advancement exceeds acceptable parameters. Their influence on galactic affairs has grown beyond what is appropriate for a species of their age and development. Elena wanted to stand up and demand an explanation. Wanted to ask what she had done wrong, what her people had done wrong. But she knew better than to interrupt a High Arbiter during a formal proclamation. Therefore, Zethval said, and the word hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The Council has approved a series of measures designed to ensure continued peace and stability. These measures will be known as the Human Containment Mandate. Elena heard the words, but her mind refused to process them. Containment. They wanted to contain humanity like some kind of dangerous animal. She looked around the chamber at the faces of the elder races, searching for any sign of sympathy, any hint that someone might speak up on humanity's behalf. She found nothing but cold indifference and barely concealed satisfaction. The Dominari ambassador was actually smiling. His reptilian features twisted into an expression of cruel amusement. After everything humanity had done, after 300 years of being the perfect junior member, this was their reward. Elena gripped the arms of her chair and forced herself to remain calm whatever came next. She would face it with dignity. She would show these ancient species what humanity was truly made of. She only hoped that her people would forgive her for whatever was about to happen. High Arbiter Zethval's mandibles clicked in a slow, deliberate rhythm as he began to read the terms of the Human Containment Mandate. And with each word, Elena Vasquez felt another piece of her faith in the Council crumble to dust. First, Zethval announced, the human fleet will be reduced by 60% within one standard year. All vessels exceeding the approved tonnage will be surrendered to Council inspection teams and dismantled. Elena's hands clenched into fists beneath the table where no one could see them. The human fleet was already tiny compared to the armadas of the elder races. Barely enough to patrol their own borders and protect their trade. Roots cutting it by 60% would leave them defenseless. Second, Zethval continued, human colonial expansion will cease immediately and permanently. No new settlements will be established beyond currently approved worlds. Any attempt to colonize additional territory will be considered an act of aggression against the Council. This was worse than Elena had imagined. Humanity needed room to grow, needed new worlds for their children and their children's children. Trapping them in their current borders was a death sentence stretched out over generations. But Zethval was not finished. Third, he said, and something in his voice made Elena's blood run cold. The Council has determined that human cultural development requires direct oversight. Therefore, all human children currently residing on non-human worlds will be relocated to Council-approved integration centers. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Elena could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except stare at the High Arbiter in horror. These children will receive proper education in galactic citizenship, Zethval explained, as if he were discussing nothing more important than a change in shipping regulations. They will learn to be productive members of the galactic community. They will be raised according to standards approved by the Council. Their parents will be permitted visitation rights on a schedule determined by their local integration administrators. Elena rose to her feet before she even realized she was moving. "You want to take our children," she said, and her voice carried across the chamber with a force that surprised even her. "You want to steal human children from their parents and raise them as something other than human." Zethval's compound eyes turned toward her, and his mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. "Ambassador Vasquez, you will address the Council through proper channels." "I am addressing the Council." Elena shot back, and she did not care that she was breaking every rule of diplomatic protocol that she had spent her career learning. "I am telling you that this is unacceptable. You cannot take our children. We will not allow it." The Dominari ambassador leaned forward in his seat, his scales rustling against his ceremonial armor. "And what will you do to stop us, little human?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Will you fight us? Your fleet is nothing. Your worlds are few. You have no allies, no friends, no one who will stand beside you against the will of the Council." Elena looked at him, at his smug reptilian face, at the satisfaction in his yellow eyes, and she felt something change inside her. For 20 years, she had played by their rules. She had smiled when they insulted her. She had agreed when they dismissed her concerns. She had worked every day to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars, and none of it had mattered. They had never seen humans as equals. They had never intended to accept humanity as true partners in galactic civilization. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to put the young ones back in their place. "This mandate," Elena said slowly, "is designed to destroy us. You are not containing humanity. You are trying to erase us." Zethval made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Ambassador, you are being dramatic. The Council has no interest in harming humanity. We simply wish to ensure that your species develops in a way that is compatible with galactic stability. By taking our children? By guiding your children toward proper citizenship. They are not yours to guide." Elena's voice echoed through the chamber, and for a moment, no one spoke as elder races watched her with expressions ranging from boredom to amusement. And Elena realized that they had expected this reaction. They had known she would protest, and they did not care. "The mandate will take effect in 30 standard days," Zethval said, as if Elena had not spoken at all. "Compliance is required from all Council members. Failure to comply will result in sanctions, including but not limited to economic isolation, military intervention, and the revocation of humanities Council membership." Elena looked around the chamber one last time. She saw the Thasians floating in their tanks, their faces as unreadable as always. She saw the Velkari delegates clicking their approval of their High Arbiter's words. She saw the Dominari grinning with barely contained excitement at the thought of finally putting humanity in its place. And she saw no friends, not one ally in the entire chamber, not one voice raised in humanity's defense. 300 years of cooperation, of compliance, of playing the good junior member. And this was how it ended. Elena reached up and unclasped her diplomatic sash, the symbol of her position as humanity's voice on the Council. He held it in her hands for a moment, feeling the weight of everything it represented. and then she let it fall to the floor. "What are you doing?" Zethval demanded, and for the first time, Elena heard something like uncertainty in his voice. "I am leaving." Elena said simply, "Humanity will not accept this mandate. We will not reduce our fleet. We will not stop our expansion, and we will never, ever surrender our children to you." The chamber erupted in noise as dozens of species began talking at once. But Elena did not listen. She turned her back on the council and began walking toward the great doors at the far end of the chamber. "If you leave," Zethval called after her, "there will be consequences. The council will not tolerate defiance." Elena stopped at the doors and looked back over her shoulder. "Then do what you must," she said. "But understand this. Humanity came to you in peace. We offered you friendship. We gave you everything you asked for and more. And you have answered our trust with threats against our children." She pushed open the doors and felt the cool air of the corridor wash over her. "We will not forget this," she said, "and we will never forget it." The doors closed behind her, and Elena Vasquez walked away from the Galactic Council for the last time in the chamber behind her. The elder races sat in stunned silence. No one had ever walked out on the council. The Forno species in 10,000 years had dared to defy them so openly. The Dominari ambassador was the first to recover. "Let them go," he said, his voice filled with contempt. "They are nothing. When they realize they cannot survive without us, they will come crawling back, and then we will teach them the true meaning of submission." High Arbiter Zethval nodded slowly, his mandibles clicking in agreement. "Dispatch enforcement fleets to the border of human space," he ordered. "When the deadline passes and the humans fail to comply, we will show them what happens to species who defy the council." The elder races murmured their approval, already planning the campaign that would bring humanity to its knees. They had done this before. Many times over the millennia, young species rose up, thought themselves special, and had to be reminded of their place. Humanity would be no different, or so they believed. They could not have known that somewhere in human space, a plan was already in motion, a plan that had been prepared for this very moment, a plan that would change everything. The deadline passed, and the council expected war. They had positioned their fleets along the border of human space. Thousands of warships from a dozen species, all waiting for the order to teach humanity the cost of defiance. Admiral Krathvalum of the Dominari stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the empty void beyond the border and waiting for the humans to make their move. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, for the chance to prove Dominari superiority against an enemy worthy of his attention. The humans were clever. Everyone knew that they were innovative and adaptive and surprisingly dangerous for such a young species, but clever would not save them from the combined might of the elder races. Nothing could save them from that. Any movement? Krathvalum asked his sensor officer, and the smaller Dominari shook his head. "Nothing, Admiral. Human space is completely quiet. No fleet movements. No defensive formations. No communications that we can detect." Krathvalum frowned, his scales rippling with confusion. This was not how it was supposed to happen by now. The humans should have been scrambling to mount some kind of defense, some desperate last stand against the inevitable. Instead, they were doing absolutely nothing. "Perhaps they are surrendering," suggested one of his officers. "Perhaps they have realized they cannot win and have decided to accept the council's terms." "No," Krathvalum said slowly, "that is not what this is. I have studied humans. I have watched them for decades. They do not surrender. They do not submit. Something else is happening." Days passed, and still the humans did nothing. The council grew impatient, demanding that the fleets move forward and begin the subjugation. But the admirals hesitated. It was too quiet, too easy. And then the first reports started coming in. Human ambassadors were leaving their posts on worlds across the galaxy, packing up their belongings and boarding ships bound for human space. Human traders were canceling contracts, abandoning lucrative deals without explanation or apology. Human scientists were withdrawing from research collaborations, taking their knowledge and their innovations with them. Human citizens living on alien worlds were requesting transport home, millions of them flooding the space lanes in a great exodus that seemed to have no end. The humans were not preparing for war. They were simply leaving within a month. There was not a single human remaining outside their own borders. The last message from human space came from a communications officer whose name had already been forgotten. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for its centuries of guidance, the message said. We will manage our affairs independently from this point forward. We wish all species prosperity and peace. And then silence, total, complete, absolute silence. The council waited for something to happen, for some trick to be revealed, for the humans to show their hand. But the humans did nothing except build walls. Observation posts along the border reported massive construction projects on every human world. Shipyards were working at full capacity, producing vessels of designs that no one had ever seen before. Orbital installations were being erected around every planet. Strange structures whose purpose the elder races could not determine, and the humans refused to speak. To anyone, diplomatic envoys were turned away at the border with polite but firm refusals. Humanity is not accepting visitors at this time, they were told. Please respect our borders. The Valkyrie intelligence services went mad trying to penetrate human space, sending probes and spies and every tool at their disposal. But nothing got through. The humans had sealed themselves away from the galaxy as completely as if they had never existed. 6 months after the mandate, the first economic reports reached the council. The news was not good. Humanity had been, without anyone quite noticing, the backbone of galactic trade. Human shipping companies had moved goods between species who could not stand each other. Human manufacturers had produced equipment that was used on worlds from one end of the galaxy to the other. Human agricultural colonies had fed 17 different species who had become dependent on imported grain and vegetables. Now, all of it was gone. Markets that had been stable for centuries began to collapse. The Valkyrie hive worlds, accustomed to receiving food shipments from human space, faced their first shortage in recorded history. The Thasians, who had relied on human engineers to maintain their underwater cities, found themselves struggling to keep their infrastructure functioning. Even the Dominari, proud and self-sufficient, discovered that their war machine depended on components that only human factories had been able to produce. This is temporary. High Arbiter Zethval assured the council, the humans cannot sustain this isolation. They need us as much as we need them. Eventually, they will have to negotiate. But the humans did not negotiate. Years passed, and still they remained silent behind their borders. The council sent increasingly desperate messages, offering to modify the mandate, to negotiate terms, to find some compromise that would bring humanity back into the galactic community. Every message was met with the same polite refusal. Humanity is content with its current situation. We do not require assistance from the council at this time. We wish all species prosperity and peace. The galaxy began to change in ways that no one had predicted, without humans to act as neutral intermediaries. Old conflicts between species flared up again. The Valkyrie and the Dominari, ancient rivals who had tolerated each other only because of human diplomacy, came close to war 3 times in a single decade. The Thasians retreated into their oceans and refused to participate in council affairs. A dozen minor species simply stopped attending sessions altogether, and behind their walls, humanity continued to build scouts who managed to get close enough to observe reported ships unlike anything in the galactic database weapons platforms that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Defenses so deep and so layered that no fleet in existence could hope to break through? What are they doing in there? The council asked, and no one had an answer. What are they preparing for? Admiral Krathvalum, now old and gray and far from the warrior he had once been, offered the only theory that made sense. They are preparing, he said, for whatever comes next. They do not know what it will be, and neither do we. But when it arrives, they intend to be ready. The other admirals laughed at him. Ready for what? They asked. There is nothing in the galaxy that threatens us. We are the elder races. We have maintained peace for 10,000 years. What could possibly come that we cannot handle? Krathvalum did not answer, but he felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of his bridge. He had studied humans his entire life. He knew how they thought, how they planned, how they prepared. And if they were building defenses of this magnitude, it was not because they were afraid of the council. It was because they knew something was coming, something terrible, something that the elder races, in their arrogance, could not even imagine 12 years after humanity walked away from the council. The first reports of the Keth-Ari swarm reached the galactic core and Admiral Krathvalum, watching the images of impossible bioships consuming entire star systems, finally understood what the humans had been preparing for. The Keth-Ari swarm came from beyond the edge of the galaxy, from the vast emptiness between stars where nothing was supposed to exist. For 10,000 years, they had been nothing more than a legend, a story told to frighten young species into obedience. Ancient texts spoke of a hunger that consumed everything in its path, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with or stopped. The elder races had dismissed these stories as myths, as fairy tales from a more primitive age. They were wrong. The first system to fall was a small Velkari outpost on the galactic rim, a mining colony with barely 1 million inhabitants. The distress signal lasted for 11 seconds before it was cut off. When the rescue fleet arrived, they found nothing, not debris, not bodies, not even the asteroids that the colony had been mining. Everything was simply gone. The council dismissed it as an anomaly, perhaps a reactor malfunction or an unfortunate encounter with a rogue black hole. But then the second system fell, and the third, and the fourth. Each time, the pattern was the same. A brief burst of panic transmissions, and then silence. It was not until a Dominari warship managed to survive long enough to send detailed scans that the council finally understood what they were facing. The images showed ships that defied comprehension, massive living vessels that moved like insects and fought like demons. There were hundreds of thousands of them, maybe millions, spreading across the galaxy in a wave of hunger and destruction. The swarm did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It simply consumed. High Arbiter Zethval called an emergency session of the council, and for the first time in his long career, his voice carried a note of genuine fear. "We face an extinction-level threat," he announced. "The Keth-Ari swarm is real, and it is coming for us all. We must unite our forces and stand together, or we will die separately, the elder races." For all their ancient rivalries and petty disputes, agreed fleets were mobilized from every corner of the galaxy. The Dominari war machine, the finest in existence, was deployed to the front lines. The Velkari contributed their vast numbers. Billions of warriors bred for this exact purpose. Even the Thasians emerged from their oceans to join the fight. The combined armada was the largest military force ever, assembled in galactic history. 200,000 warships, crewed by trillions of soldiers, all united against a common enemy. They met the swarm at the edge of Velkari space, in a battle that would be remembered for generations. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, The combined fleet had been reduced to scattered debris. The Dominari flagship, pride of their entire species, was torn apart by bioships that moved faster than anything the admirals had ever seen. The Valkyrie swarm carriers, designed to overwhelm any enemy through sheer numbers, were consumed by creatures that treated them as nothing more than food. The Thashan waterships, filled with the greatest warriors their species had ever produced, vanished without a trace. Admiral Krathvalum, now commanding what remained of the Dominari Navy from a battered cruiser, watched the destruction unfold on his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before: despair total. Absolute, crushing despair. "We cannot stop them," he said to his officers, and his voice sounded old and broken. "Nothing can stop them." The swarm pushed deeper into Council space, consuming system after system with mechanical efficiency. The Valkyrie homeworld was evacuated just hours before the bioships arrived, its ancient cities abandoned to the hunger. The Thashan ocean worlds were boiled away, their purple seas turned to steam by weapons that the Council could not even understand. The Dominari threw themselves at the enemy again and again, fighting with all the fury their warrior culture could muster. And every time they were destroyed in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The elder races gathered one final time. There were no more fleets to send, no more warriors to sacrifice, no more tricks or strategies that might buy them time. The swarm was coming, and nothing could stop it. High Arbiter Zethval looked at the representatives around him, at the faces of species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and he saw only fear. There was one option remaining, he said slowly: the humans. The chamber erupted in angry protest. The humans abandoned us. Someone shouted, "They left us to face this alone. Why would they help us now?" "Because," Zetfall said, "if they do not help us, they will be next. The swarm does not discriminate. It will consume everything in its path, including human space. Perhaps they can be made to see reason." A message was sent to human space. The first official communication in 12 years. It was simple and direct, stripped of all the diplomatic formality that the Council usually insisted upon. "The galaxy requires your aid," it said. "The Keth-Ari swarm threatens all life. Honor demands you answer." The response came from a human admiral named Marcus Chen, a man whose name had never appeared in any Council database. "We protected ourselves." The message read, "We suggest you do the same. Our children are safe. Are yours?" The words hit the Council like a physical blow. For 12 years, they had assumed that humanity was hiding behind their walls out of fear. They believed that the humans were weak, that they would eventually come crawling back when they realized they could not survive alone. They had never considered the possibility that humanity had been preparing for something like this all along. They knew, Krathvalum said, his voice barely a whisper. They knew the swarm was coming. They have spent 12 years building defenses while we did nothing, while we planned to subjugate them. They were preparing to save themselves. The swarm reached the border of human space 3 weeks later. Billions of refugees from shattered worlds had gathered at the edge of human territory, begging to be allowed entry, but the humans had refused. "We cannot guarantee your safety," the border stations announced. "Our defenses are designed for our own population. We regret that we cannot assist you at this time." The refugees watched in horror as the swarm approached, knowing that they were about to share the fate of so many others. And then something happened that no one had expected. The bioships crossed into human space, millions of them swarming toward the border stations with the same hunger they had shown everywhere else. But they did not find easy prey. They found the wall. Defense platforms lit up across the border, weapons of impossible power tearing into the swarm with devastating accuracy. Ships emerged from hidden positions, vessels that moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Engaging the bioships in close combat and winning the battle lasted 9 hours. When it was over, The Ketheri swarm existed only as debris floating in the void. Not a single bioship had made it past the wall. Not a single human world had been touched. The refugees, still huddled at the border, stared at the carnage in stunned silence. The elder races, watching from what remained of their shattered civilizations, could not believe what they were seeing. Humanity had done in 9 hours what the combined might of the galaxy had failed to do in months. They had stopped the unstoppable. They had killed the unkillable. They had saved themselves when no one else could. And now, for the first time since walking away from the Council 12 years ago, the humans opened their borders. Refugees may enter. The announcement said, "Please proceed to the designated processing stations. Welcome to human space." The refugee fleet stretched across the void like a river of broken dreams. Billions of survivors from a dozen shattered species waiting at the border of human space. They came in ships that were barely functional, held together by desperate repairs and failing systems. They came with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the terror in their eyes. They came because there was nowhere else to go. Admiral Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of the human dreadnought Indomitable, watching the endless stream of vessels crawling toward the processing stations. And he felt no satisfaction in what he saw. This was not victory. This was the aftermath of catastrophe. The final chapter of a civilization that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. The Galactic Council was dead. Its great hall had been consumed along with everything else on the Valkyrie homeworld. Its traditions and protocols and ancient rituals meant nothing now. All that remained were survivors, scared and desperate and looking to humanity for salvation. "The representatives are ready to meet with you," his aide informed him. And Chun nodded slowly. "Send into the main conference room. And make sure Ambassador Vasquez is there." The representatives who gathered in the conference room were a shadow of what they had once been. High Arbiter Zethval, former leader of the most powerful species in the galaxy, now commanded nothing more than a handful of refugee ships, the Dominari. Ambassador had lost his ceremonial armor somewhere during the evacuation, and without it, he looked small and fragile and old. The Thasians floated in portable tanks that were barely large enough to contain them, their purple waters clouded with stress hormones. These were the elder races, the ancient powers who had once looked down on humanity with such contempt. Now they sat in a human conference room, waiting for humans to decide their fate. Ambassador Elena Vasquez entered the room last, and Chun watched as the representatives reacted to her presence. She was older now, her hair silver instead of black, but she carried herself with the same dignity she had shown on that day 12 years ago when she had walked out of the council chamber. "Thank you for coming," she said, and her voice was calm and measured, as if she were addressing a routine diplomatic meeting instead of the shattered remnants of galactic civilization. "I know you have questions. We have more than questions," Zethval said, and his mandibles clicked with barely contained emotion. "We want to know why. Why you abandoned us. Why you hid behind your walls while the galaxy burned. Why you waited until now to help." Vasquez looked at him for a long moment before answering, "Do you remember what you asked of us, High Arbiter? Do you remember the human containment mandate?" Zethval's compound eyes shifted, and Chun thought he saw something like shame in their depths. "That was different," the Valkyrie said. "That was a matter of galactic stability. It was a threat against our children," Vasquez replied, and her voice hardened. "You wanted to take human children from their parents and raise them according to your standards. You wanted to teach them to be proper galactic citizens. You wanted to erase everything that made them human." The room fell silent. "We spent 300 years trying to be what you wanted us to be," Vasquez continued. "We followed your rules. We accepted your limitations. We gave you everything you asked for, and more. And when we became too successful, too innovative, too alive, you decided to destroy us slowly instead of all at once. She walked to the window and looked out at the refugee fleets. So yes, we walked away. We sealed our borders, and we built defenses, and we prepared for whatever came next. And when the swarm arrived, we were ready. The Dominari ambassador leaned forward, his scales rustling against the unfamiliar human chair. You knew, he said. You knew the swarm was coming. We suspected something was coming. Chun answered. We had detected anomalies at the Galactic Rim for decades. We tried to warn the Council, but our concerns were dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of a young species. So we prepared alone. Why did you not help us fight them? Zethval demanded. You had the weapons, the defenses, the technology. You could have saved billions of lives. Vasquez turned back to face the representatives, and her expression was sad but determined. Because you would have demanded to take command, she said. Because you would have insisted on incorporating our technology into your own fleets, under your own control. Because even facing extinction, you would have tried to put us back in our place. And because we could not trust you with weapons of that power, not after what you tried to do to our children. The words hung in the air like a verdict. What happens now? The Thashan representative asked, his voice bubbling through the water of his tank. Your people are safe. The swarm is destroyed. But we have nothing. Our worlds are gone. Our civilizations are in ruins. We are refugees in your space, dependent on your mercy. Vasquez looked at Chun, and some unspoken communication passed between them. Humanity will offer sanctuary, she announced. Your people will be welcome in our space. Your children will be protected, raised by their own parents, according to their own traditions. Relief flooded the faces of the representatives. But Vasquez was not finished. However, there will be conditions. Zethval tensed, his mandibles clicking nervously. What conditions? There will be no Galactic Council, Vasquez said firmly. There will be no mandates, no approved cultural standards. No committee of elder races deciding what is best for everyone else. You will live among us as equals, not as elders, not as superiors, not as the wise ancient powers guiding the young ones toward proper development. Equals, nothing more, and nothing less. The representatives exchanged glances, and Chun could see them struggling with the concept for 10,000 years. They had been at the top of the hierarchy. They had made the rules and enforced the standards, and decided the fates of younger species. Now they were being asked to accept something completely different. If you cannot accept this, Vasquez added, you are free to leave. We will provide you with supplies and coordinates to unclaimed systems beyond human space. You can try to rebuild your civilizations on your own, without our help. But if you wish to stay, you must accept that the old ways are dead. The swarm killed them, along with everything else. The Dominari ambassador was the first to speak. If we refuse? He asked, though his voice lacked its usual arrogance. If we try to restore the old order? Admiral Chun smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. Then you are welcome to try the swarm, he said. Oh wait, you already did. How did that work out for you? The Dominari looked away, unable to meet the humans' eyes, one by one. The representatives accepted the terms. The Volcari, once so proud of their ancient heritage, agreed to live as equals among species they had once considered inferior. The Dominari, whose entire culture revolved around dominance and hierarchy, accepted that strength was not the only thing that mattered. Even the Thashans, philosophers who had spent millennia believing they had discovered every truth worth knowing, admitted that perhaps there was more to learn. It was not easy. It took years for the elder races to truly accept their new place in the galaxy. Old habits died hard, and there were conflicts and disagreements, and moments when it seemed like the old prejudices would tear Everything apart, but humanity was patient. They had learned patience during 300 years of accepting insults and limitations. They had learned it during 12 years of isolation and preparation. And they used that patience now, guiding the survivors toward a new way of living. The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the old order was different from anything that had come before. Humans and elder races lived side by side, learning from each other, building something new together. There were no masters and no servants, no elders and no young ones. There was only the shared knowledge that they had all come close to extinction. And that survival required cooperation rather than domination. Elena Vasquez lived to see the first generation of children born in this new galaxy. Children who grew up knowing nothing of the old prejudices and hierarchies. She watched as human and alien children played together, learned together, dreamed together, and she knew that this was what her people had always wanted. Not conquest, not revenge, not the satisfaction of proving the elder races wrong, just the chance to live in peace, to raise their children without fear, to build something good in a universe that had too often been cruel. Humanity had not asked to become the protectors of the galaxy. They had not wanted to be the ones who saved civilization from extinction, but when the Council had overstepped, when they had threatened what mattered most, humanity had walked away from peace and built something better, and now, finally, they had the chance to share it with everyone else. The stars still burned with the same cold light they had always known. But the galaxy that turned beneath them was changed forever. It was not perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was alive, and growing, and full of hope. And that, Vasquez thought as she watched the children play, was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.